least my coffee cup matches my shirt, I guess. So
Oh yeah, that's perfect. Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Streams of Income podcast. We're here with Mr. Aaron Hunt, and this is a bit of an experiment. So I need you to let me know if you like this or not. If you've seen my previous podcast, you know they're just kind of hyper straightforward because usually I'm energy drinks and coffee, and so they're just hyper and straightforward interviews. And so this time we are doing a slower coffee talk, a coffee conversation, if you will. And we're going to talk more coffee and a little more relaxed. And also, a few apologies on my part. I just got over bronchitis. And if I start coughing, well, let's just say I'll try not to. And coffee will help with that. But apologize for my voice. And I'm also kind of off grid and the Wi Fi's out. So I'm running this whole thing off of a cell phone hotspot right now. So Aaron is in much better straits. He is in the depths of Pennsylvania, I assume still.
yeah,
And
that's where I'm hanging out today. It's supposed to be sunny and 60 today, but it's gray like it normally is this time of year. So
oh, yeah, it's gray raining at 60 here. Yep. So, Aaron, I tell you, since we're talking about coffee, I found this old mug. I had a picture of me on it, and one that somebody took while I was on deployment. And so, what are you drinking today? Tell me about your what's in the mug.
so I've been doing a little bit of a deep dive into co-ferments and anaerobic fermentation coffees. So today I'm drinking a cinnamon co-ferment from Esteban Zamora. It was roasted by Black and White Coffee Roasters in North Carolina.
That sounds pretty impressive. Tell us exactly, because I read your Facebook post about this, a really long one about the experiment, and man, I got so excited because I was like, I'm so glad he posted this before the interview because I want to hear more. So, give us the kid's eye view version of what co-fermentation is, so everybody else will know.
Yeah, so co-fermentation it's kind of inspired by like the wine making industry, but they add in other things other than coffee into the fermentation process. You know, all coffee is fermented. So in this case, there was cinnamon added into the fermentation process. I've tried some that had strawberry, some with coconut, some with other fruits. So I just it's very hot right now, trendy wise, in the specialty coffee area. And I hadn't tried it. So none of the roasters close to me are doing much with it. So I just said, you know what, I'm going to spend a couple months and see if this is something that I'll enjoy or not, you know. And
Yeah,
you know,
that sounds like fun. I mean, the closest I've gotten to that is drinking like wine barrel aged or whiskey barrel aged coffee, which is
yeah,
pretty good.
right, right. Yeah, and so that's the thing. So far, I got to be honest with you. For me, my opinion on co-ferments is that they're probably not going to be my thing moving forward. They're interesting. Most of them, the aromas don't quite match the flavors in the cup, and there's just something in my brain that it's not jiving with it, you know. But this cinnamon one, I for years I just put cinnamon in my coffee instead of cream. There's a lot of health benefits from it. So this made sense. And actually, this has been one of my favorite co-ferments so far, maybe the favorite. And it's only
Yeah.
the third cup. I've just started dialing it in, and this third cup is like, man, this is getting pretty good. So
That sounds pretty cool. That reminds me of when Pepsi came out with clear Pepsi, and everybody thought it
right.
was cool and tried it, but drinking something clear that tasted like Pepsi just seemed weird. So, add the chemicals back in and people drink more.
Yeah. So it's it's a way to get different flavors and get unique flavors and honestly raise sort of the value add component for a lot of the coffee producers. And so the guys on the front end of the process get a little bit more of the money, which historically that hasn't been the case.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm all for it. And I wanted to try it. And I won't, I'm not going to say I'll never buy anymore. In fact, I have a hop co-ferment that I just ordered. It'll probably be here at the end of the week, but I won't be trying that for probably 3 weeks, probably. But I'm looking forward to that. I love craft beer too, so like that one feels like maybe that one might work, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. Well, it sounds really cool. And here's the crazy thing to me is if other people they hopped in the podcast, they're listening to this, they're going to say, well, Aaron is a coffee guy. This is what he does for a business. Where's his coffee shop? Where can I order stuff? But that's not the case. So tell us a little bit about what you do for a living.
Well, I mean, I'm kind of semi-retired at this point. I'm a bit, but the thing that I do for a living is I do fishing content. So I have a YouTube channel, I have a blog. I've got my own line of fishing rods at this point from Kistler Custom Rods in Texas, handmade American rods. Uh, so that came out of, when I quit my corporate career, I was kind of like, all I want to do is just go fishing. And so I started documenting that process. People started following along. And so now fishing, generates a little bit of extra income and makes some of my travels tax deductible. So, or at least pre-tax. So that's pretty good. So, but yeah, so that's kind of the job, I guess, is a fishing content creator. But it doesn't feel much like a job. And some months I'm all in, and other months I'm like, yeah, I want to hang out with friends. I want to do more with the church and stuff like that. So it's I like the flexibility. I could probably do more and grow faster, but it's just something that I enjoy doing.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty cool. Partly because I don't fish. You probably hate me for saying that, but not everybody you understand not everybody's made to be a fisherman.
Yeah,
And
right.
I do follow what you do because it's amazing to me because you're not a Mr. Beast, somebody who's got millions to pour into your videos. You're just a fairly normal guy doing some great content, and but you're getting a pretty big following out of it, and that's what I like is your strategy because it fits. It's something I can follow. There's no way I can do what Mr. Beast is doing, but I
Right.
can watch you and I
Yeah.
can say, well, what is Aaron doing that I need to change about mine?
And that's the thing is like when you retire early, you don't just start throwing money at stuff, right? Because like, okay, I want to make this money last. If I live to be 95 or 100, I'm trying to get 50 years out of my investments. So, both of us are. So I'm married. So it had to sort of to support itself. And honestly, when people started following along, my first thought was like, it'd be cool if this pays for my fishing gear, right? And so that was maybe the secondary goal is like once I started getting to the point, I'm like, hey, maybe I could monetize this. If I make enough to pay for my fishing gear, I'd be happy. And so I'm way beyond that at this point, which is cool. Uh, but and then it started getting to the point of like, well, this could really legitimize and give me the excuse to travel more once my wife retires. So she's about a year out from calling it quits as well, and
Yeah,
we want to travel a lot. And so when I started talking to my accountants and financial team, are like, this sounds like a brilliant idea. Um, and so that's why I really started pouring into it. And then literally probably a month or two after that, I had the opportunity to connect with Trey Kistler from Kistler Rods. And he's like, hey, I want to design a new line of rods. I think you're the guy to help me do that. And then eventually they just put my name on them. So
that's pretty cool. I mean, that's like the dream for. I used to do a lot of mountain climbing, and kind of the dream was always like, I don't know, have an ice axe with my name on it or some piece of gear that I developed, but I never got there. But that's still pretty cool.
there's still time, right? I mean, who knows what's
Yeah.
going on, so
At
yeah.
this point, I'm thinking a coffee blend, the Dr. Dave
Hey,
blend or something. I don't know.
that would be awesome. That should be something I should shoot for as well. But honestly though, even in my corporate career, I worked in a handful of different industries. I kind of did the same thing, but I was always wanting to experience new things and do new things. And so, with the YouTube channel, right now I'm in that phase of like, okay, what's the next step? So I'm now starting to think about what do I want this to look like in January of 2026. And so what do I need to do in 2025 to sort of set the foundation so that it feels kind of natural, right? And
Yeah.
it's just like, okay, I'll just lead right into that. So I haven't made a ton of content the last few months because I was doing a certain thing and I'm like, okay, but how do I get from there to where I want to be in January 2026 with the content, without alienating people, without making a sharp change. And so that's what I've been working on. And actually, it was just last night and this morning, I think I finally had like the little like light bulb moments like, if I do this, it should work. And so actually, I have one video that I'm working on that'll come out in a week or two. That's kind of my what I've always done. And then the
Yeah.
next video is going to be the beginning of starting that transition. So we'll see how it goes.
Okay. So if people are hearing this and you're not following Aaron Hunt already, you need to follow him soon because you can make your 2027 plans off what he's doing next year for 2026. But I love planning ahead like that because a lot of people just wake up one day, they figure I need to work on this right now because I want it to change next week, and then they give up because they didn't put the time in. And I mean, none of this stuff builds fast these days.
No, I mean, I mean, there's still tons of opportunity on any social media platform. I mean, some of them are dying down. I mean, Instagram may be really challenging to grow at this point, but there are some people who are, I'm sure, are going to do it well. But YouTube exploded in 2020, right? So if you had a solid foundation, if you would have been where I was now, if I'd been there in 2020 and made content through that phase, like there were so many people that just took off then. But the thing is I'm still seeing people who go from 0 to 100,000 subscribers in months,
Yeah,
right? So if you have the skills, if you figure out how to make content that people really want to watch, you can still grow fast there. And I think it's the same on any platform. For me, it's less about like how fast can I grow and more about how do I document the journey that I want to document while learning the skills that I want to learn. And ideally inspiring at the very least, like my nieces and my nephews, my great nieces, my great nephews, to
yeah,
be to like you can do something other than just go get a job and work for 40 years, right?
yeah.
And so
And that's after 4 years of college that you got to pay off.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's kind of the motivation, but it's just like I just want to do what I want to do at this point in my life, and we're big Dave Ramsey fans, and so I think we lived like nobody else, and now we're in the
Yeah.
phase where we can start living like nobody else,
Oh
So
yeah, man. You were on baby step 7 now.
yeah, exactly. So
Yep. Yep. So hey, before I forget, because people are going to ask and scold me, I'm drinking Pablo's Pride. I like single origin, so I got some Guatemala. But this guy, Darren Burke, you might find this interesting. I was doing a coffee tasting party at my house one time, and my wife went to Costco to pick up some big bags of coffee. And this guy that owns this company was doing one of the samplings at Costco that day.
nice.
And so she's talking to him, and he's like, "Hey, I'm free tonight. Why don't me and my wife come over? We'll bring some coffee. We'll make your coffee." And so I had this coffee tasting party that turned out, it was like 10 to 20 friends. We had a celebrity guest there all of a sudden. The guy that owns Don Pablo Coffee and his wife, he bought into it or married into it. His wife is actually the family, the generational family that created this.
Wow.
And so I love buying his coffee still. But I've got it mixed with a reishi mushroom coffee. And so I kind of
Okay.
cut my blend with that, but that's what I'm drinking. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I Guatemala is definitely one of my favorite regions. You know, you may not know this, but actually, I was it might have been in that Facebook post though. But I actually roasted my own coffee and had a nonprofit coffee roasting business for 3 or 4 years. And so, like, I really grew to appreciate like these micro lots and the small things. And I was part
Yeah,
of a coffee co-op, and we were bringing in all kinds of crazy stuff from Ethiopia and Central America because sometimes it's just one bag, right? And the
yeah,
big importers, they're not going to deal with the one bag. And so, there's opportunities to bring in these little micro lots and to save some of these really awesome processed coffees that otherwise would just get mixed into a generic blend. And it was amazing some of the flavors we could get. And unfortunately, things have changed in Ethiopia now. So a lot of that fruity blueberry balm stuff that we used to get, it's hard to find because the
yeah.
government has changed some of the processing and the way things are handled there. So that's a disappointment. And that might be what led me into co-ferments because I think the first one I read about was a blueberry co-ferment. And it's because I was
Oh,
trying to find these blueberry Ethiopian coffees that I used to love. And there's just not a whole bunch of them out there anymore.
that's pretty cool. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I like to buy local honey because I mean, you can buy it where the bees are. You know what flowers the bees are feasting on,
Yeah.
and getting coffee the same way would be really amazing. So yeah, I remember you mentioned that in the post. What does a non-profit coffee co-op? How does that work?
Well,
Or was that the problem that it's not around anymore?
no. So the idea is I just got into roasting my own coffee and then I started serving it at church and people were like, "Wow, you could sell this stuff." I'm like, "Yeah, I don't need another business, right?" But and then a couple months after that, we had a pastor from Haiti who we do some mission work with who was at our social, at our church social, and he's like, "This is really good coffee." Uh, and somebody said, "Oh, well, Aaron roasts that," and so we started talking, and he's like, he's like, if you don't want the money for yourself, he's like, why don't you raise money for the mission? And I'm like, that's a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
And so I started a little nonprofit called Roast for Haiti. It ran for 3.5 years.
Wow.
And I had some really diehard customers who were kind of crushed when I decided to stop operations. But, I shipped, I think I ended up selling to people in 31 different states over the course of
Wow.
it was either 31 or 37. So like I hit a lot of the states in the US who ordered from me. And again, I focused, I got some of it's just you network with the right people and you get a little lucky. So I got in with a small coffee co-op who was bringing in greens. They were run by mostly church leaders and a couple pastors. And the way I met him was I played in a band, and we were asked to open at a big uh, Christian music festival in Canton, Ohio. So it's like the only football stadium I ever played, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't like a huge crowd or anything, but we still did a stadium event, and we opened for somebody who was on the national charts at the time. Uh, but so what? So we just started talking because we were hanging out after the sound check and stuff, and we started talking about coffee. And he's like, "You're into coffee too?" And so then it just ended up being a very very interesting way for things to connect. He hooked me up with my semi-professional roaster that I was using. So I
Yeah.
got a good deal on it. And then when I ceased operations, I actually sold the roaster for the same price I paid for it to somebody else in the co-op. So it was it felt like it was meant to be. And the only reason I stopped it was because I changed jobs, and that job started having me take 2 and 3 week trips internationally. So
Yeah.
there's no way I could, sort of sustain the roasting and getting the orders out when people would order, because
Yeah.
a third of my orders were just off the website, and I never knew when they were coming in. So I decided to just end that phase. But anyway, so that's probably a long story, but.
No, no, I mean, it's fascinating to me because just the idea of coffee anyway, but how businesses can start from just hobbies and but especially ones that help people.
Yeah, I mean, it was part of it came out of because at the time we had done mission work for Katrina and Rita rebuilding. So we'd taken over 3 years, we'd taken 3 different trips, led work teams down there, rebuilt houses, and I think the last year we were down there, I think I had 50 people on our work team,
Yeah.
and we were working 3 different sites. And so like it was nice to make that level of impact, and it felt really good. And then we started sending teams down to Haiti. But in that phase where we were going down there and doing that, I was having a few weird little health issues. And so my doctor didn't want me to get the vaccinations that I needed to go.
Mm.
And he's like, he's like, if you have a reaction to one of those, he's like, it just doesn't seem like the right thing for you to do right now.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. And so we supported it in other ways, and through fundraising and stuff. And so then that became kind of the trigger to be like, oh, well, okay, I can definitely support that mission work this way then. And so that was a big part of the motivation, was just to be able to continue to do that.
Yeah. No, that's pretty cool. I like that. So kind of on a different topic, I know a few people, my mom mainly, who drink coffee, cheap, nasty coffee, just for fuel, and that's it. Like they drink it like they do water. So, what is your ideal coffee experience? Do you have like a routine, or is it on your desk all day, or how's it work?
Now, I mean, typically for me, I have coffee 2 or 3 cups in the morning. I would like to have a little bit more coffee so I'm experimenting with some decaf, but it's hard to find a really good decaf.
Yeah.
But
One that's not toxic.
yeah, exactly. I so it is a little bit fuel for me. In fact, there was a period over the last several years where that's probably mainly what it was. But I started getting to the point of like, I really want to enjoy my coffee again. And it was my wife who actually suggested several months ago, said, you need to buy an ice grinder again. You need
Yeah.
to start spending the time playing with all the different coffees you used to like to buy. Go buy some stuff from the local roasters and all again. And so that sort of got me back into it. And that's why now I'm like, oh, well, there's some new processing that's happened since I was really into the
Yeah.
games. So I want to experience this, and so that's where the sort of the co-ferment, and then this, I'll just call it alternative processing because there's thermal
Yeah.
shock, anaerobic processing. There's all these crazy things that they're applying a lot more science and data, and a little bit of technology, but it's mostly science on trying to extract flavors that are there, and just different ways in the processing. And so that's so I think half of the fun for me is pulling out as much flavor as I can from a specific bean, and not drinking the same coffee over and over and over.
Yeah.
And much in the ways that, like, for me, this feels very parallel to craft beer at this
Yeah.
point, right? So in the, up until like 1985, from Prohibition to 85, you had fizzy yellow beer basically, right? I mean, there were, you could get Guinness imported, maybe Beck's Dark, but for the most part, beer in America was this fairly tasteless, fizzy yellow beer.
Yeah.
Um, Not trying to be biased or anything, but beer was beer. It was just, it all tasted the same. And then, small brewers were allowed to start mass producing. And so you could start getting things like pale ales instead of
Mhm.
lager. You started getting porters. You started getting India pale ales, which was just this mind-opening experience for me back in the early 2000s when I
Yeah.
had my first good IPA. I feel like coffee is in that same phase right now. It's like, okay, well, we coffee was coffee. You get a little bit better coffee. You get a Guatemala, you could taste a little bit more coffee, a little bit more caramel sweetness maybe. So you get an Ethiopian, it's a little bit fruitier, right? You roast a Sumatra dark, it's got that real nice, like dark, dried fruit flavor along with the
Yeah.
roast, right? So there was some variation, but now with this the anaerobic processing, the thermal shock stuff, they're starting to pull different flavors that, in my belief, they're in there, right? Because they're not adding anything other than, they're adding a certain strains of yeast. Those processes, I feel, are really refining, what you can do with coffee, and it's creating completely different flavors. I had one last week called buttercream from September Roasters out of Canada,
That
and
sounds good.
oh, it's very good. In fact, I saved the rest of it to see how it finishes up. The same bean is roasted by somebody else, and it's called Milky Cake, right? And so these are crazy names, but when you start, like, I could literally taste the buttercream icing and a little bit of cinnamon and cardamom notes in these beans, and they didn't add those flavors in. They just changed the way they processed them to
Wow.
bring them out. And so to me, that's like part of the craft beer movement. And then you get into the co-fermentation. Well, that's like, adding the fruit to the beer, adding doing some of the, some of the crazy things that they do in the craft beer movement. It's the same thing. So it's really, to me, it aligns very well. And I think that's part of why I enjoy it, is there's
Yeah.
this whole, when I traveled internationally, I always called it or even in the US, I call it the local flavor experiment, right? I didn't want to eat at a national chain. I didn't want to
Mm.
have a beer that I could get somewhere else. I didn't want to have a
Yeah.
wine I could buy in the grocery store. I wanted to get something that I could only get in that region. And for me, coffee is it was that way back when I was roasting, and it's become that way again. Like, these are these flavor experiences that just create these different memories, and it just shows you what's possible. And it's amazing to me that, coffee doesn't just have to be coffee, just like beer doesn't have to be beer. So
Yeah. It's fascinating to me, as long as, let's say, mass produced coffee has been around, people, and most people still do, it's either black coffee, add a lot of crap to coffee, and then like Starbucks charges a lot of money by adding a lot of crap to coffee.
yeah.
Or then there was cold brew coffee. And people think, well, what else can you do with coffee? But so you kind of see this as possibly the next big breakthrough in coffee.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I mean, right now it's in the realm of coffee nerds for the most part, right? It's just the people who, really go deep on coffee, kind of like, the $25 four-pack of craft beer,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the average Joe consumer is not going to do that. So I think there is some of that too. I mean, a lot of these coffees are like $25 for an 8 or a 10 or a 12 ounce bag. So they're not cheap. But some of them weren't bad. Like the ones that I just ordered, I the coffees that I'm getting from that roaster in Philly that are being shipped, they weren't any more expensive than buying a bag of coffee at Whole Foods. So
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so there are some that aren't well known, first of all. And I'm hoping they're as good as some of the big names, internationally. And but very least, it'll be a fun experience.
Yeah. No, it sounds pretty neat. Now, for you, do fishing and coffee interact at all? I mean, like part of the experience or anything, or just kind of separated?
It's actually part of what I do need to figure out. Like, how do I incorporate some of the other aspects? Like, so beer is a little bit easier for me to incorporate into the fishing stuff, um, especially because I drink a lot of non-alcoholic beer. So there are craft non-alcoholic beer, sort
Yeah.
of like So that's what the great decaf coffee. That's sort of the same kind of thing for me. But a lot of times because I have the 2 cups in the morning. I'm drinking a cup when I'm going, but then by the afternoon, I'm drinking water and stuff like that. So it right now it doesn't incorporate that well. But as we start traveling more, part of the change that I want to make is telling a little bit more of the story about the experience,
Yeah.
and not just about the fishing and not just about the gear. So as we get into that, and I start focusing more on the big picture of telling the story about the destination and all of that. I think a lot of those days start with a cup of coffee, and so it will become part of the story for me. But right now, it's kind of the thing that gets me going in the morning. And quite frankly, it probably gets me out on the water later than I want because I spend a lot of time on my coffee some days, like,
Yeah.
oh, what do I want to have and how do I want to brew? So
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've been bad about is like when I'm going hiking or out in the field or something, I'll take coffee in a thermos, and it's good for the drink, it's good for the caffeine and to stay warm. But you lose the experience of the coffee. And it's one of the things I want to start experimenting with is making field coffee.
you're right.
Just the enjoyment of setting up a camp stove and doing what you can, making some cowboy coffee, whatever you got to do. I mean, I remember a scene in the movie Black Hawk Down when they took refuge from a firefight, and the character played by Ewan McGregor. I mean, there's bullets flying, explosions. He's pulling out this little, hot pot and a espresso maker and everything. It's like, you got to take time. You got to take time to enjoy the little things, no matter what's going on. And so
Yeah,
that's kind of what I'm wanting to incorporate into some of my experiences.
yeah, I think I'm trying to remember the brand. I think it might be Jet Boil makes a little camp. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and so I keep thinking about it. Eventually I want to get one of those. Maybe this winter is a good time to do that, and get one of those, make an AeroPress or a pour over or something,
Yeah.
out on the water and just sit and enjoy the scenery. Because sometimes you're out fishing, there are bald eagles around, there's waterfalls, there's just hearing the water run and the wind blowing through the trees and all that stuff. It's a great place to enjoy a cup of coffee if you actually stop and take a moment to do it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times for me, I'm more focused on like, okay, I know these spots that I want to hit. I want to, I'm so focused on trying to get the fishing done, and then all of the videography stuff. Sometimes I'm running 5 cameras on these fishing trips, so it's like I need to get to that point where all of that is kind of second nature. And then it's like, oh, hey, let's stop and take some photos. Let's stop and spend 30 minutes and make a cup of coffee and enjoy it. So
Yeah.
I'll get there eventually. It's all part of the process.
Yeah. I go the opposite of that old Thoreau quote. I only see the destination and forget the journey. And unless I take pictures, I don't even, half the time don't remember what I did. I'm just so hyper to get a thing done,
Yeah.
to hike a trail or see a waterfall and then rush home.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and honestly, that was part of why I started my YouTube channel is because there was this moment where I don't remember what triggered it, but I went back and started reading some of my blog posts from like 2012, 2013. And I was like, it was so cool to be able to relive some of that and like be reminded of some of the things that I was going through and that I was doing and I was learning back at that time. And so I said, oh, I need to start a blog again. And I'm like, and I'll just document this journey into fishing that I'm doing, because there's a very specific style of fishing called bait finesse style. And So I'm like, I'll just document that. And I'm like, well, you know what? It's 2021. Let's do video instead of and so that's how it started.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it does force you to slow down a little bit. It forces you to capture a little bit more of the moment. I think the better I become at being a filmmaker, the it I'll spend even more time noticing the details in my surroundings, and it's part of the thing that I've been spending time figuring out is like, okay, well, how do I need to change my mindset almost to be able to take that next step in my filmmaking journey, and it's kind of funny because in that interim, as I've been figuring that out, that's where I've gone back to coffee to be part of that slow down and enjoy the actual craft. And I think that's so important in life in general. Like we can just rush through, right?
Yeah.
But if we intentionally choose things that slow us down to make us sort of savor the moment, to enjoy the flavors of life, whether it's coffee or something else, I think it's really powerful. And it's funny because just a couple nights ago, I was out dancing with some friends. We do ballroom dancing as well.
Yeah.
And I'm coming up on 4 years since I quit working, and one of my friends is getting close now to making that decision. He's like, "Does time just fly by once you quit working?" I'm like, "Dude, it feels like it's been over a decade. Like time almost creeps by for me at this point." Because I'm changing what I do every single day. Like I'm not in a routine. And I think that's one of the main reasons that time seems to go faster for us as we age, is we stop learning new things. And so our brain's not firing new networks. And it doesn't have anything new to associate the passage of time. And so when we look back on it mentally, it just feels like it blew by because we didn't do anything different. We didn't have these little markers along the way for our brain to say, oh, that was 3 months ago, right?
Yeah.
So at least that's how I've come to believe a lot of that works,
Yeah.
because the years where we do all kinds of new, crazy, amazing things, they feel like forever. Like the year, like people have been saying, like it's already November, and I'm like, wow, man, it's like it feels like it's 2 years, since Christmas was here, So I think it's important to always be trying to learn new things or do new experiences if you want to feel like you've lived a really long life.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so I got two more big questions. The first one, you mentioned some traveling. So is there in the lineup, the dreams there somewhere like a top fishing spots across America kind of tour or
Yeah, so one of the things I'd love to do is I've started thinking about like the top 25 or the top 50 fishing locations by state,
yeah,
right?
okay.
So like the idea of like, so if I'm going to Tennessee, like, okay, well, what are the places that I've always wanted to fish or I think would be cool? So but if I was just going to pick a few, I had this opportunity once and I wasn't really prepared for it. And so I will do this maybe next year. I want to fish Glacier National Park. There are some really interesting trout species there. So that is probably very high on the list. Getting to Alaska, catching some grayling, that would be
Yeah.
big for me. Um, uh, One of them I achieved last year, which was to catch a peacock bass down in Florida. So I
Oh,
did that already. Uh, if I was going to go national or international, I'd really like to fish the Amazon. And I don't know if I'll ever do that. It's not the kind of adventure my wife wants to sign up for, I don't think.
yeah.
So there is a part of me that would love to do like, hey, let's catch a fish in all 50 states in 50 days.
Yeah.
And but that would require a little bit of sponsorship and stuff. But who knows? That it's an idea that's on my list.
Yeah.
Uh, so that could be maybe one of those crazy types of experiences to do 1 year after my wife retires.
Yeah. All right, so we definitely need to add Jetboil to the list of sponsors to seek out for the tour. Yep. All right, so very last question. Excuse me. The last question is if money is not an issue, so you don't have to worry about money and you don't even really have to worry about how much time you have to put into it. If you could pick a dream stream of income, like the one thing that you could do the rest of your life and you know you'd enjoy it, you'd be happy with it, what would that be? Would it be fishing or coffee or something else?
So that's probably the problem in my life, and the thing that drives my wife crazy is that I can't answer that question. I really can't. The closest thing for me is in the movie Office Space, where they talk about if you had $1 million, what would you do, right? And Peter Gibbons like, I'd do nothing. I'd go fishing. I'd do you know, I'm not quite there because I like to contribute, but even fishing, right? So over the last few months, um, you know, the idea of focusing on fishing to create income, it's like, well, do I want to do that? Because it starts, at least for my mind, it starts changing the way I think about it. Like, well, is that going to be a good return on my time to
Yeah.
get the income back out of it versus just doing what I want to do? And it's part of what I've been struggling with. And it's again, I think this is a benefit of a great marriage. Is when I was talking to my wife about it, she was like, "Why don't you just then make the videos that you want to make?" She's like, "It's not about the money." She's like, "And just start doing whatever it is that you want to do in 2026, but do it now." She's like, "Just do it
Yeah.
in a way that we can do it right now." So I'm like, "Okay, that's a good idea." So for me, I think I really struggle to say like this is what I would like to do the rest of my life. Um, because I'm always learning new things. I mean, if it's kind of crazy all the different little side businesses that I've had, all of the things that I've done. Like I at one point I was even getting paid to play music, which just still blows my mind that I ever ended up in that situation. But you know, so many people that are much better guitarists than me never get a paid gig, you
Yeah.
know? And so the fact that I filled in with a pretty decent blues band here, and got paid 4 or 5 times in a 5 week
Yeah.
period, it's like, okay, that's pretty crazy. And you know what it do? Well, it paid for another guitar. So I'm like, okay, that's um yeah, I have all of these different pursuits, and what happens is when new things come up, I want to learn about it. And sometimes it becomes something that I'm really into. But then I get to the point like, okay, well, I so craft beer is an example.
Yeah.
You know, I brewed my first batch of beer in 1990. You know, and then in the early 2000s, I really got into it and got into competition brewing and was fairly successful there. And then it's like, okay, I want to try all these different beers. There's, you know, thousands of different beers, and I've had, you know, well over 1,000 different beers. But now when I go to the store, there's one beer that I probably buy 75% of the time
Yeah.
because it's for me, it's the best beer that I've ever had. And so why not just keep buying something that I know I'm going to love, and then I
Yeah.
spend time then trying to figure out something else. And so for now, one of my flavor experiences that I'm going back to is coffee, because if I had to just say, okay, I'm going to go buy a coffee, and I had to pick something I didn't know, if it was a Guatemalan coffee, I was probably going to buy it
Yeah.
because that flavor profile tends to work best for me. But right now, some of these Colombian coffees are absolutely amazing, and Colombia is almost synonymous with coffee for some
Yeah.
people. Um, so I don't mean to like not answer the question, but for me, the way my mind is wired, I I have not. There's no way I could say I know that I could do this for the next 40
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
It's part of why I worked in 6 different industries. I started in electronics. I went to like the heavy power industry, like big industrial city
Hmm.
side transformers and stuff. Got into medical devices. Worked in like the heating and cooling, industrial equipment, I guess would be the best way
Yeah.
to call that. Then I was back into medical devices. Then I worked in railway internationally, and so railway control systems. And then I jumped from there to healthcare. You know, it's just kind of like, okay, well, but they were all kind of new experiences for me,
Yeah.
and that was the important thing. And so for me, if there was a job that would allow me to, on my own schedule, at my own pace, just every year get into a new thing and share my thoughts on it, that would
Yeah.
probably be it. Right. And so,
Okay.
you know, and I don't know what that would be, but
No,
kind
that's a
of,
perfect answer because that question, I get such a variety because some people, you can tell they've been thinking about it and they answer right away with something they're already doing that they want to do more of. Some of them have this thing in mind they've never done, but they have it in mind. But a lot of entrepreneurs, like I'm a startup guy, not a maintenance guy. I love just starting new things, learning about it, and then I get bored and find something else. And yeah, for me, I guess if somebody asked me that question, it'd be I want to do what I'm doing now. Just I want to not have to hustle so much for it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it that honestly, it part of me that I feel like that's part of where I'm getting is that over the last 4 years, I've been like, okay, how do I build something? How do I build something? And I'm getting to the point of like, but you know what? I spent 25 years building a lot of things. Maybe now what I need to do is really just do what I want to do, help
Yeah,
people where I can, spend time with the church, do some of those things. And it's nice having the time to do that, but maybe I need to spend less about figuring out how to maximize the income from something.
yeah,
Because we've done a good job with getting the investments where we needed to over the course of our life. And so I barely touched those over the 4 years I've been retired. So it's like
yeah,
it's still doing pretty good. The picture looks better and better. So that's where we're starting to say like maybe it's just time to just do exactly what it is that we want to do and get ready, kind of make that transition so that when my wife retires, we can travel. Like
yeah. Oh
like
yeah,
because right now the concern with creating any kind of income stream that commits me to a schedule, right? Is like,
totally.
well, how's that going to limit the travel,
Yeah,
right? How's that going to, and so that's kind of the phase we're in now. Maybe I get back to the point, maybe some income stream comes out of that, and it's like, okay, that's great. But we have several income streams. The main is investments at this point.
yeah,
People always think about passive income. Oh, it must be nice. Well, you don't know what we gave up for 25 years to create that, right?
yeah,
It's really front loaded.
yeah,
Is the right way to think of it. And so we gave up a lot of things to invest more so that we could hopefully do what we're doing right now. So
yeah, yeah. People don't realize all passive income is front loaded at some point.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Either
That's
money or time.
yeah, it's even with YouTube. So it's highly likely that at some point, I have that video that clicks, right? And
Yeah,
you get this big growth. Well, what happens is you get an income spike with YouTube because you have now 200, 300 videos in backlog that people can binge, right? And when they find that, they sort of, and so I've had those little peaks, where all of a sudden my income doubles or triples for a few months because I have a video that takes off and then a bunch more people find it. And it's like, oh, okay. But then reality sets back in, or I don't create as many videos, and it's like, okay, well, at least it's paying for all the fishing stuff. So,
yeah, exactly. Yep. Well, Aaron, thanks for being with me, man. And I'll let you go because there's probably some fish out there waiting on you right now somewhere.
yeah, actually, there's a video camera waiting for me to film the
Oh,
rest of the review. So I got to finish that up today for a sponsored video. So, but
yeah. And in case anybody wants to get in touch with Aaron, start following him. I'll put all of his links in the show notes. And Aaron, if you don't mind, I'll dig up that Facebook post and I'll put links to some of those coffees that you ordered too. And maybe we'll
yeah,
get some people into this new thing.
that is absolutely awesome. It's been a fun journey for me, and I'll be continuing to post on Facebook and a couple other places about it, just because it's very enlightening, and at the very least, it's going to develop your palate for coffee.
Yeah,
And so, if you like coffee and you want to learn more, and maybe you just want to figure that out, I think experimenting with all kinds of different coffees in a short period of time is a great way to do that.
yeah. Oh, hey, before people ask me in the comments later, what's that favorite beer?
Oh, it's from Dogfish Head Brewing. It's called 90 Minute IPA. It's an imperial IPA, so it's fairly high alcohol. So you don't I don't drink much of it, but it's just nice when you just want to have a beer to sip on for,
Yeah,
a few hours while you're watching a football game or something. It's become my favorites. And I've been a big fan of Dogfish ever since I learned about them in the 90s.
yeah.
Met Sam a few times who owns and he founded it. So to me, it's the perfect IPA. It's a great balance of malt and bitterness. It's the perfect beer. So
Okay. All right. Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks for being with us, man.
no problem. Thanks.